We'll be using React Native Navigation to build our app. There are a few other solutions available too and also very popular, like React Navigation is one of them. Though from my experience, I recommend React Native Navigation as it provides a 100% native navigation on both the platforms. So what that means is it doesn't take up those extra event loops on the JavaScript thread. Most apps have two types of setup. Either they are a single screen app, which are also called the stacked apps, or a tab based navigation. The choice is totally dependent on what we are looking to build. In this lesson, we'll look at how to set up both of these. The stacked apps also tend to have a side menu or a drawer, and React Native Navigation provides out of the box support for that too. These types of apps are generally called stacked apps because the screens that are navigated to are pushed onto the base screen, creating a sort of stack. The animation on both the platforms are configured to have the familiar native experience. That is, the new screen slides from the right on iOS while it fades in from the bottom on Android. Tab navigation are very popular and are seen on most of the apps. It provides for easy access to different sections of the app from a single location, the tab bar. The boilerplate code starts with a single screen setup. It is called the splash screen in the code, and then it moves to a tab navigation. Now, this kind of setup is great to have some initial marketing screens, or load user data, or ask for login, and then take the user to the main experience. The drawers or the side menu are like partial screens that pop out on top of the current screen from the left or the right, depending on the configuration, not fully covering it. This is very similar to what we have seen traditionally on mobile websites. It can be accessed by either swiping from extreme sides, the left or the right, or we can have an accessible button like a burger menu. So let's jump into the code. And apart from the two navigation setups, we'll also look at using modals. Okay, so let's start the Metro bundler, and we can run it on iOS or Android using the simple code that we have. It's already configured on the scripts. So let's just do yarn iOS. Now, if you remember from the navigation index.tsx, uh, we were listening for a launched event, and then we'll just show the splash screen. Now, right now it's just showing a simple screen, as we will see once the app installs and runs. It's already built, so it shouldn't be long. Yeah, and we have our bundler running. Okay. Now this is a splash screen. Right now what it does is if we click the button, it takes us to the tab navigation. But let's say we don't want that. We want a stacked app. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to go to the navigation, and then right now it's just a simple screen. We need to tell it that we want to build a stack app. So what we'll do is instead of passing the component directly, we'll say that we want stack, and then as children we'll just pass uh, sorry just pass the component of the splash screen. So id screens dot splash and uh, name. Okay, so now this is a stacked app. Let's go to the splash screen and try and instead of moving to the tab navigation, let's try and move to a different screen. So we'll just call this function, and we'll need the component ID for this. uh, and we can get this from it's available in the props for every screen. So we'll just do navigation dot, since we want to push screen, we'll do push. We have the component ID, and we'll just pass what screen we want to see. Now for now I have a dummy screen created. Let's just do that. And okay, it's giving an error because I have not declared it in props, the boon or the bane of TypeScript. And let's just click. Yeah, so now as you see what's happening, the screen is being pushed onto the base screen. Now if we move to the second screen and now we push more screens over it, we can see how a stack has been created, right? So that's why this is called a stacked navigation. Now we've directly called the navigation here. I recommend moving all these routings to the router that we created. So what we'll do is, I already have a route defined for pushing the dummy screen. So let me just call that from here instead of doing this. So we'll just do router dot show push screen, and it needs the component ID. So we'll pass that. And that should do it. Great. So it also keeps our component really clean, right? So let's add a side menu or a drawer to the screen. So for that, again, we need to go to the navigation, and in root we need to say that we'll add a side menu, and a side menu will have a left or a right and then a center. So we'll say it's a left, and on the left the component that we want to show. So I've already created a simple screen name drawer. So if we go to it, it's nothing. It's a very simple screen, just shows two texts. And let's add the ID, and the left is the drawer, and what do we have in the center? We need to tell it that. So we'll have center, and we can simply copy that. We'll need the entire stack. And if we save, yeah, so it's not visible right now, but if you pull from extreme left, there it is, the drawer menu. Now we can also add an icon to access this. Let's just do that very quickly. Let's go to the splash component, and let's add a button. We will add a burger icon, which I have already added to the assets. So there's a burger menu. So let's just do that. It's a simple burger menu image. And pressable is basically the new version of touchable opacity, which basically is we can use to handle any kind of touch events. So what we'll do is we just need to add the on press event to it, and we'll say that we'll call show burger menu. That's a method that we have already declared. So we just do navigation.merge options, and this is the ID that we need to pass. It should be the same as what we declared for the drawer screen. So let me just make it same. once I save it, it's taking the space, but it's not really visible. That's because the image we need to pass some kind of a height and width. So let's just call it menu. And let's go and declare uh, height. Let's say 44, width. Let's say 44, and save it. Oh, we need to save this too, and there it is. It's coming in the center because the container has align center. So let's just put it out of the container. Yeah, that does it. And let's add some space. So that looks better. So we have our image and it should work now. There. Yeah. So that's the side menu, the drawer. The drawer is actually just a screen. We could build anything on top of it. We could build a list of navigation menus. We could build profile, user settings. So yeah, it's very extensible that way. Next, let's look at tab navigation. So if we just go to navigator and index, and instead of doing show splash, let's just call the tab navigation. Now this is a method that we have defined that sets up tab navigation using React Native navigation. It's not something that comes out of the box. And if we just save it, our app now boots into a tab navigation. This is also great, though I do recommend keeping a splash screen and then moving to a tab navigation. The reason for that is sometimes we need to fetch user data from an API or do some kind of loading from async storage or SQLite, and that may take a couple of seconds, which doesn't seem long, but from a user expectation for an app, 2 seconds is a long time. So the splash screen really helps in putting some kind of a placeholder like a GIF or a small video that can keep the user busy and while the data loads, and then we can move to a tab navigation. So if you look at the setup of tab navigation, it's quite similar to what we had for stack. So there's so we are still using a side menu, but let's just, if you could ignore this for a second, there's the bottom tabs, and then it has children, and now each children is actually a stack. So we're just putting 2 tabs right here, like home and settings, and each of them is a stack because on each screen we'll be able to push more screens. So we can push screens onto home tab, push screens onto settings tab. That's why we have a stack, and then it's all very similar to the earlier one. We pass in the component ID. This is default prop. If we want to initialize a screen with store data, we can do that. Or if we want to pass props from a different screen, like when coming back from some screen to a parent screen, we can also do that. And these are some of the options, like the top bar. Do we want it to be visible? Do we want to draw behind it? And these are the bottom tab options that we see. So there's the font size, the text that we want, and the text color that we want. Now, if you would notice, we are using the typography here. We're not using any hard-coded hex strings. And if you want to display an icon, we can pass in the icon. Generally, this is generally 2 sets of icons. One is for home and one is while it's active, that's selected. But we can also do that using these attributes, selected text color or selected icon color, and that ways the tabs will get highlighted with whatever we pass. So like I said, we'll be building an e-commerce app. So let's add a couple more tabs to it. So we can simply copy one of these, and let's say that we'll have a search screen, but for now let's just pass the settings screens because we'll need to add that screen to our views and register it in the navigation, if you remember. So So we need to register the screen, so we'll do that. But let's just add two more of these and call the third one search, or let's call the second one search. Third one can be, let's say, cart, and we'll have a fourth one for user profile, or let's call it settings, and just save it and reload, and there we have it. So we have a home, search, cart, and settings. So right now they're sharing the screens, but we'll add these screens. So that was easy, right? So we've already seen pushing a screen and it automatically provides a back button. But what if we want to go back manually? How to do that? So this is the dummy screen. Let's just open that. Dummy component. Let's add a button to it. Now we'll be using an element that we've already declared, and it's one of the basic elements. We'll talk about elements and widgets in our design system lesson, but let's just say for now it's a default button that we have configured for our application with some default styling, and the text we passed is shown. So we'll just say title equals go back, and on click we want to call this dot back navigation. So let's just declare that. So we again do navigation. Anything related to navigation is supposed to come from navigation dot. This time we do, last time we did push, now we do pop, and we need to pass the component ID, this component's ID, because we want to pop this, right? So now if we do go back, that works. Let's say that we have pushed 3/4 screens on top of this base screen, and we want to come back to not the root screen but probably the screen 1 or screen 2. So how do you do that? So in that case you just pass the component ID of the screen that we want to move to. So let me just add a couple more screens and come back and show that. So I've added 2 more screens. Let's just call this dummy screen 1, and we will push the screen 2. I've added dummy 2, dummy 3. So let's just push navigation dot push. We'll pass the component ID, comma, component, sorry, ID screens dot dummy 2, and let's call it push 2, and we need to pass in the name, which is screens dot dummy 2. Save it. So yeah, that pushes dummy 2, but dummy 2 has a go back. Let's just copy this entire thing, go to dummy 2, and let's push 3. So dummy 3, and it probably needs the screen variable and the component ID. So let's just do that. It will push 3. Now we are at 3. Now we want to click this button and we want to go back to the first screen, dummy 1. Now right now it's taking us to 2, but we want to go to 1. So all we need to do is, let's just go to dummy 3, and this is the back one. So we'll just go to navigation, and it has a method called pop 2, and this will pass the ID of the first screen, the same ID that we called it with. So it was in home.component, and the component ID that we passed was this one, screens.dummy. So let's just go to 3, and let's just do screens.dummy, save it, and now we have gone back to screen 1. So this way we can control the navigation in a stacked setup. So we can go to, let's look at that again. We go to 3, and from here we go to 1. But what if we wanted to go to the base screen? Let's say that we have completed our journey and we don't really know how many screens are there. We just want to go back to the base one since the journey is done. How to do that? So for that, there's another method that's called pop to root, and it takes the component ID, and let's just save it, and we're back to the base screen. Next, let's look at switching tabs. Users can always click on these, but what if we want to do that programmatically? Let's say we have a cart icon, and when we click on it, we want to go to the cart page. So let's just reuse this push button. So let's go to home component, and on show push screen, we're reusing this. We just need to call a navigation method. So let's do navigation dot. We need to use merge options. Now this will take the component ID, and we need to tell it that we need to switch to one of the bottom tabs and make the new index as, so it's called current tab index, and we want to do it 2, and just save it. So now when we click this, it moves to the cart screen. So we don't need the burger menu here, so I've just added a cart icon, and let's just make it cleaner. So the image is on the left. Let's go to the style, and let's say align self flex, and now this works because the parent container, the touchable opacity, has a style called cart container, and which already has display flex. So it's pretty similar to how CSS works, and that's the beauty of React Native 2. So next, let's on press, let's create a function for this, and so we'll say show cart screen, and we can copy this over here, the component ID, we can just copy it over, and we'll say show cart screen, just save it, and on clicking this, we are going to the cart page. Okay, so one last thing, let's look at modals. Modals are also components. We can render any screen on it. So let's try that. Let's add another button here, and it says show modal and show modal. So let's declare this. So now again, the navigation object, it has a method that's called show modal, and we need to pass something very similar to what we did in navigator. We need to tell what we need to show. So we can say if we want to show a stack, As we can see, it supports stack, right? So it's very extensible that way. We can show a single screen, we can show stack. What that means is we can show a modal and then again push screens inside the modal if the flow asks for it, right? Sorry, children will take an array. And then we just pass the component that we want to show. Let's say we want to show screens dot dummy2, and let's click it, and there we have it, our modal. Now since we said that this is a stack, the push and also should still work, right? So that's the beauty of it. And if you look at the animation, this is very native, right? The modals in the native iOS apps, they behave this way. When we push the screen, it slides in, and when we go back, so the animation is all very consistent. So let's look at, we saw that we can dismiss the modal by sliding this down, but what if we wanted to do that programmatically? So let's go to dummy2 and do that. Dummy2 component, and instead of the go back, we'll say dismiss modal, and or let's just create a new button. It's quite simple, and let's do it right here. Navigation dot, we have dismiss modal, right? And then we just need to pass the component ID. Just save it, and once we click, the modal is dismissed. So to recap, we saw how to do a stacked app, how to push screens, add a drawer to it, and a drawer is a simple component, a screen, and then how to set up the tab navigation, push screens, go back to a particular screen, and or come back to the base screen, and how to use modals, how to dismiss them. There's just one more option with modals. There's also an overlay. So overlays are actually full screen, so whenever you use it, you have to be careful because it will not have that default option of dismissing it. So let's just do that, and so we need to have some kind of a strategy to go back to the previous screen. And there are a couple of other options with navigation for modals, like there's a dismiss all modals, and there's also a dismiss modals, which we can use if we pass an array of modal that we want to dismiss. And similarly, we have dismiss overlays. So that should cover the navigation of the app. For the purpose of our app, the e-commerce app, will be doing a tab navigation, and we'll continue building on this app.